I learned that true happiness lies in doing something useful with your life.
Eleanor Roosevelt said one day, looking back at her life. Mrs. Roosevelt helped out many people individually, while also working on big projects to benefit the whole world. Eleanor Roosevelt's work with the United Nations demonstrated her leadership when she helped draft an international Bill of Rights that would support equal rights for people all over the world. Eleanor's legacy was secure because she dedicated her life to helping the people around her and across the world, while inspiring many young Americans. Eleanor Roosevelt was born on October 11, 1884. When Eleanor was first born, her father, Eliot, described the new baby as
more wrinkled and less attractive than the average.
Little Eleanor grew up knowing that she wasn't pretty, and she knew that this disappointed her mother and father. Eleanor grew up in New York City, New York, as the oldest of three. In 1894, Eleanor and her siblings were orphaned after their father committed suicide, and 2 years before that her mother had died from diphtheria. Growing up without her parents was very hard for her. Eleanor learned a lot from her childhood struggles and used that wisdom to help her later in life. When Eleanor was 19, she married Franklin Roosevelt, who would be elected the 32nd President of the United States of America in 1932. As First Lady, Eleanor took on the role of a leader unlike many before her. Mrs. Roosevelt spent a lot of time writing helpful, informative newspaper columns, and she answered letters written to her asking for help. She worked to change lives and make the world a better place while inspiring many young girls to make a difference. Part of Eleanor's legacy was being remembered for trying to have equality among everyone and for the world to be in peace. Eleanor Roosevelt's husband, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, died from a stroke in Warm Springs, Georgia in 1945.
The story is over,
Eleanor Roosevelt said the day after Franklin died. She thought her contributions to the world were over, but some of her greatest accomplishments were yet to come.
At the present time, it is of paramount importance that the women and girls of our country be given training so that they may do their share in the war emergency. How this training is given and who does it is of great interest to us all.
In 1946, Harry Truman appointed Eleanor to serve as one of 5 American delegates to the meeting of the United Nations General Assembly. Harry Truman did this because after Franklin Roosevelt died, Eleanor and Harry Truman's political relationship became a friendship. When Truman first asked her to serve as an American delegate, she was hesitant and very nervous because she said she had no experience in foreign affairs or parliamentary procedure. Eleanor Roosevelt accepted the position and started the journey that she later described as
one of the most wonderful and worthwhile experiences in my life.
All of the other American delegates were men and did not approve of Eleanor Roosevelt because she was a female, and they had dismissed her as an emotional, rattle-brained woman. They sent her to Committee 3, a part of the United Nations which dealt with humanitarian, social, and cultural concerns, and was thought of as unimportant by the other delegates. An unknown delegate from the United Nations admitted,
"We figured Mrs. Roosevelt couldn't do much harm there."
Surprisingly, Committee 3 soon became a well-known area of conflict because there was a political battleground between the United Nations and the Soviet Union. The problem was that there was a debate over what to do with the remaining 1 million refugees stranded in displaced persons camp after the war in Europe ended. Since this problem fell into Eleanor's committee, she was responsible for speaking for the point of view of the United States. When she addressed the General Assembly on her opinion, she spoke without notes like so many times before. Eleanor was nervous because she was going up against the famous delegate Andrei Vyshinsky, who was the head of the Soviet delegation and one of Russia's great legal minds. Eleanor Roosevelt won, and it was a political win for the United States and especially a personal win for Eleanor. Many American delegates wanted to eat their words from before because they have now seen Eleanor Roosevelt taking a leadership role for the United States. As Senator Vandenberg said,
"I want to say that I take back everything I ever said about her, and believe me, it's been plenty."
Eleanor Roosevelt was unanimously elected chairwoman of the United Nations 18-member Human Rights Commission in 1947, which had been instructed to draft an international Bill of Rights. That meant that she had to interpret the basic rights of people everywhere. These basic rights include the right to free speech, a fair trial, and the right to an education and a decent standard of living.
There are many parts of the world that have not even an elementary understanding of what human rights mean.
Eleanor believed it was very possible and an important job, and she was excited to put these high thoughts into terms other people could understand. Over the 2 years it took to create the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Eleanor Roosevelt became a skillful diplomat as she balanced out the opinions of the delegates from various nations and cultures. It took many drafts and hard work to perfect this declaration, especially when the Commission fell behind on their work, and Eleanor made her colleagues work continuously, sometimes 14 to 16 hours a day. December 10th, 1948 was a great day. That was the day that at 3 in the morning that the United Nations General Assembly approved the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was a huge achievement to be accomplished, and every delegate for the United Nations there that day gave Eleanor Roosevelt a standing ovation which had never happened before.
I'm very glad to be able to take part in this celebration in St. Louis on Human Rights Day. Ever since the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was passed in Paris in 1948 on December the 10th, we have fostered the observance of this day not only in the United States, but throughout the world.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was the result of the experience during World War II. People from all over the world vowed that the problems about personal rights that had just happened in the recent war would never come between the world again. That vow eventually became the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, drafted by the Commission on Human Rights, a committee whose chair was Eleanor Roosevelt. A huge part of Eleanor Roosevelt's legacy was this Universal Declaration of Human Rights document she worked for. Hernan Santa Cruz, a member of the drafting subcommittee from Chile, wrote,
I perceived clearly that I was participating in a truly significant, historic event in which a consensus had been reached as to the supreme value of the human person, a value that did not originate in the decision of a worldly power, but rather in the fact of existence.
About Mrs. Roosevelt's committee in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights document.
I'm going to read you the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance.
Eleanor served as a delegate throughout President Truman's 2 terms. She worked with people from all over the world. Eleanor was extremely hardworking, and the other delegates called her a very independent and dedicated lady. People who watched her work from the United Nations said she was
particularly skillful in negotiating and a very independent lady.
Even though she was most concerned with women's rights, she fought hard for equality for everyone. Over the course of Mrs. Roosevelt's life, she visited numerous countries. Eleanor visited places in the Middle East trying to solve conflict issues. She also traveled multiple times to the Soviet Union. While touring India, Pakistan, the Middle East, and the Soviet Union, Eleanor Roosevelt looked at social conditions as well as discussing about world peace. Eleanor visited South America many times as well, discussing the issues she was most famous for acknowledging, equal rights and world peace.
But could you define a liberal for us? I mean, in your own words.
It's very hard to put in a few words what a liberal is, but I would feel that a liberal was a person who kept an open mind, was willing to meet new questions with new solutions, and felt that you could move forward. You didn't have to always look backwards and be afraid of moving forward.
Eleanor Roosevelt's work with the United Nations demonstrated her leadership when she helped draft an international Bill of Rights that would create equal rights for people all over the world. Eleanor's legacy was secured because she dedicated her life to helping the people around her and across the world, while inspiring many young Americans and future First Ladies to come.